Welcome back to Reading Bear. Today, we will take a look at some new revenge stories. And if you enjoyed my content, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel and post some bear emojis in the comments. Let's go!
The first one is titled, Mugging the Muggers. This is not my story, but a story my friend told me. Sorry, this is a long one, but there's a lot to this story. First, a little bit of context. My friend, let's call him D, worked for many years as a pizza chain delivery driver. He didn't need to, he has his own business, but he did it for pocket money, and to appease his in-laws who considered him a deadbeat if he didn't have a time clock punching job. My friend is also a firm believer in the Second Amendment, and is known for legally carrying firearms wherever he goes, even to this day. D equals my friend, M equals mugger, Mill equals mother-in-law. Believe it or not, she is ex-law enforcement, and has a place in this story. At the time of this series of incidents, D worked at a store that was in our version of inner city. Not many tips, lots of bad directions, no shows, and customers trying to do anything to get a free meal. This is where our story starts. So D was working the evening rush shifts, when they get a call in order, at an apartment complex that's particularly known for stiffing the drivers. When the pizza was ready for delivery, it was his turn to make the run. He knew he would be stiffed, but it was really close to the store. So he took the pizza and drove to the complex to make the delivery. Now, the drivers are not supposed to be armed, but there had been a rash of muggings and burglaries in the area, and the drivers that had guns had started keeping them in their vehicles for safety. So he gets to the complex, leaves his gun on the dashboard, locks his truck, and proceeds up the stairs to the pizza's destination. As he goes up the stairs, he notices a youngish Hispanic guy outside the apartment opposite his, smoking a cigarette. He says hi as he walks up to the door of his order, then turns and rings the doorbell. Nothing. He knocks on the door. Still nothing. He knocks again, calling out pizza delivery. No response. He double-checks the tag, and it's the correct address, but nobody's home. Great, another no-show. He shrugs, turns around and starts to head back down the stairs. What's the matter? They know there? Sucks, man. D, yeah, it happens. Well, you have a good one. He starts walking down the stairs, and heads toward his truck. He gets down almost to the bottom of the stairs, when hey man, what's gonna happen to that pizza? D, it'll get eaten at the store, or someone will take it home. He continues walking, and he faintly hears M coming down the stairs. How much is it, man? Maybe I could pay it for you. By this time, D is at his truck, and has it unlocked. He has a pretty good idea of what is happening, but he's playing ignorant. He turns back to face M, 22.65. If you want to buy it, I'll sell it to you. Oh, I ain't got much with me. D, I understand, dude. Have a good one. He gets in his truck, puts the pizza on the seat, and grabs the gun, to move it to the seat beside him. His window is rolled partially down, to let in fresh air. He's not surprised 30 seconds later when there was a tapping on his open window. Sure enough, M is at his truck, tapping on his rolled down window with a big knife, and a big crap-eating grin on his face. With a knife in his hand, I think you should just let me have that pizza. And I'll take your wallet, too, man. D already had his gun in his hand, so he pulls it around, and points it at M. I don't think so, man. Think you can manage to stab me, before I pull the trigger? Back away from my window, dude. M goes pale and his jaw drops. He puts his hands up. I was just duckin' jockin', man. Take it easy. D gets back out of his truck, still pointing the gun at M. M looks terrified. What you gonna do, man? D, I'm going to mug the mugger, big smile. Toss the knife into the back of my truck, dude. Right now. Come on. This is my best knife, man. D, and now, it's mine. I'll take your shoes, and your belt, too. Hurry it up. Toss them in the back of the truck, too. M grumbles as he tosses the knife into the back of D's truck, then pulls off his belt, and sits down on the bottom step to take off his shoes. The whole time he's cussing in Spanish under his breath. He then tosses belt and shoes into the back of D's truck. Now what? D, back up the stairs, dude. D's backs up to the door of his truck. You have a nice night, now. He gets into his truck, and drives away. When he gets home, he takes the knife out of his truck. It really is a nice knife, so he adds it to his knife collection. The belt and shoes were decent, too. The shoes were actually steel-toed work boots. Not D's size, so he gives them away to someone he thinks could use them. About a week and a half later, D is once again working the evening rush shift. An order comes in from the same complex. D knows that complex well, and realizes this order goes to the same parking lot, just 2 buildings down from where the attempted mugging happened, so just to be safe, he tells the manager he will take it when it comes out. D's pretty sure M has learned his lesson, but he doesn't want to take chances with another driver. So when the pizza comes out, he packs it up and drives out to the complex. Tonight, the parking lot is pretty full, and he can't pull up in front of the building. So he parks his truck, and grabs his gun, and puts it in his hand. Then he grabs the insulated bag the pizza is in, and puts it over the gun in his hand. The bag covers the gun perfectly, so no one will know he has the gun, unless he puts the bag down. He walks to the apartment, ground floor this time, and rings the bell, then knocks on the door a couple of times. No one's there. He shakes his head and turns around to head back to his truck. There stands M, this time with a big baseball bat in his hands. Guess he didn't learn his lesson after all. M, you ain't at your truck this time, man. What you gonna do, now? Big crap-eating grin. D yanks the bag off, and points his gun at M. That's okay, I brought it with me, this time. Now, why don't you turn around slowly, put your hands up, and walk calmly back to my truck? You remember what it looks like, right? M, or, man. M puts his hands up, turns around, and walks to D's truck. D, you know the drill, dude. Toss it in the back. M, man, I got this. D, and now, you're giving it to me. Toss it in. M tosses the bat into the back of the truck. D, now, where's your wallet, dude? The next one is titled, Leave Your Trash for Everyone Else? Let me get that for you. Let me start off by saying the building I live in is full of slobs. Dirty the hallways because they know the cleaning guys will take care of it. So hey, why not just make a huge mess because it's someone else's problem, right? It's a pandemic and the cleaning crew here have to work harder and make sure every surface is sanitized and just extra cleaning measures as a whole. It's an 8th-floor building and they also clean the building next to us. I feel for them. Anyways, here's how my revenge started. I was walking my dog and on the way back in the whole elevator was littered with a shitload of pieces of Christmas tree like everywhere. As I got off my floor I noticed tons of it all over the carpets. So being the sleuth I figured I followed the trail of twigs to see which apartment it came from. I'm not joking, they must have dragged the damn tree all the way down the hallway because it was everywhere. I had enough of people disrespecting our building and the people who work hard to clean it. So I did what I thought was right. I spent 45 minutes making sure I got every last twig, every bit of it, swept the hallways, everything, so all that was left was a bag full of their laziness. I proceeded to barricade their apartment door with all the trimmings. Maybe they forgot them, right? Felt good. The next one is titled, No Street Parking. I live on a short dead-end street. It's also not very wide, so there is no parking on the street anywhere. My daughter's boyfriend stopped by one day to quickly run in to pick something up. It wasn't 5 minutes and the police show up and give him a parking ticket. I knew who called. The witch across the street who thinks she is queen of the neighborhood. Her house was built by her parents and was the first house on that street. She thinks that makes her entitled. Just 4 days later I see a woman park in front of her house, on the street. It took about 15 minutes for the police to arrive after I called them. It filled me with joy down to my toes to see her argue with the officer. Didn't work and he put the ticket on the windshield. If looks could kill, I wouldn't be here 10 years later to talk about it. The next one is titled, My Mother, the Career Terminator, or the Tale of Two Teachers. This is the story of how my mum destroyed 2 teachers for messing with me and my older brother. Some background: we all were born and live in Poland, so some things work here differently than in other countries. Me and my brother both suffer from glaucoma. He is currently blind, but he had better eyesight than me when we were kids. Our mum is not perfect. She is in fact very imperfect. She can be selfish, petty, egoistic, annoying, and she tends to forget everything wrong she did, but she will remember even the smallest slight against her, true or not, and will not forgive it. She has some characteristics of classic sociopath. But if anyone just touched her children, he would invite his own doom. Hell has no fury like my mother being upset. When it comes to wrath, Khan was a puppy when compared to our mother. First story happened when I was in 4th grade, at the end of May, 1996. I went to a school for blind and visually impaired, as my left eye is broken. That year we had a new class and a new teacher, let's call him Mr. Moron. The class was a combination of how it works, home improvement and shop class. It was in 1996, back then it was okay for 10 to 11-year-old kids to use hand tools. Our teacher was young, and in order to be more hip, or whatever you call that with us, he threw at us one-liners from 1001 Funny One-Liners and Insults booklets. By this he gave us permission to retaliate the same way. And we did, but because we were kids, then not only we were better at this, but also knew more biting responses. Because of the state of my sight, it's very hard for me to recognize faces, and almost impossible to see if someone is happy, sad or upset at me. So one day I crossed the line and upset the teacher so much, he actually smacked me in the head. Hard. Side note, glaucoma increases dramatically the risk for retinal detachment, which can lead to blindness. And I already had one eye that didn't work. So I told it to my mum, when she came to pick me up. My mum just straightened up, asked, who witnessed it, entire class of 9 students. She grabbed one of my classmates, he went pale, when she did, and dragged us both to the principal's office. She barged in like Spanish Inquisition and asked our principal if he knew what happens in his school and if he liked to have a visit from some journalists from local radio station. The principal asked what it was about, and then she told me to tell the story, which I did promptly. She then asked my friend, is it truth, K, not his real name? Is it? Yes, ma'am, he mumbled, barely standing in front of God's wrath. We were told to leave. I'm sure K felt like death row inmate getting amnesty just minutes from scheduled execution. Mr. Moron was asked to come in. After few minutes of yelling, my mother suggested that she would smack his head a few times, pleading principal didn't want to have media involved, and suggestions that Board of Education for the province will be informed. The teacher left. Defeated and broken. And he never returned. I think he became a cameraman for weddings. Second story happened earlier, in November or December. My brother went to normal, public school. He was in 8th grade. His English teacher, our second language, didn't like him. His classmates didn't either. One day my brother couldn't answer a grammar question. The teacher, let's call her Ms. Duckup, told his classmates that he needs a beating. Well, they assumed it was their homework, so as soon as classes ended, my brother was surrounded and beaten up by 6 or 7 of them, while rest of the class watched. I remember when he returned home that day, all bloody and bruised. My mum asked him what happened, and when he told her, she ordered me to get dressed. She took care of brother's injuries, and we went back to his school 20 minutes later. My mother invited to the principal's office both Ms. Duckup, class teacher, Ms. Incompetence, and school counselor. This time I stayed outside the office, but despite a soundproof doors I heard our mum yelling. Counselor was beaten with decibels for not doing his job, that is dealing with classmates not liking my brother for being visually impaired. The class teacher was declared an incompetent idiot for not seeing signs that the classmates wanted to beat my brother, but only needed a reason to do it. Ms. Duckup was informed that after her 15 years of experience she is still a duck-up and won't teach anyone, anywhere. The Board of Education will be informed. End result was that Ms. Duckup was dismissed disciplinarily and lost her right to teach. Ms. Incompetence had a permanent negative mark in her record. Board of Education was informed, and my brother was moved to my school. The principal was happy that she would never again have to face my mum. The next one is titled, Just Another Uber. For context, I became an Uber driver this quarantine. Even I am 16. The government here doesn't give a duck to young drivers, but I know how to drive and I drive carefully. This happened 2 months ago. I was driving my uncle's old AE92, an old Corolla with a semi-weak AC, forward and a manual. Since his Vios was his daily car, I was driving my rounds and I got a new client and I headed to the person's location. I pick him up, a kid around 8 and a 4-ish woman, and they told me to go to a mall, so I started driving. The drive was rather peaceful, well, so I thought. Karen, how old are you, young man? Me, 16 ma'am. I could feel a burning stare right behind my head. I thought to myself, oh, for the love of the CV6, I just triggered a Karen. Then my phone popped with a notification, the cancelling notification. I had experienced some passengers doing this to get free rides and I knew she's the same. Karen, oops, sorry, I accidentally cancelled it, but continue the ride since we are practically there. I stopped the car and looked at the rear view. Me, out. Karen, what? Me, get out, you cancelled, so get out. She looked at me with the typical Karen face and she started to rant while I just gave her my deadpan face. Karen, drive us or I'll report you to the cops. I have been driving for roughly 9 months as an Uber and I even got police as passengers and they even complimented for my smooth and well-mannered driving. Me, out. Karen, we won't get out till you drive. I looked again in the rear view and saw the kid visibly upset. I gave a sigh and had a grin since I was petty against the mother. Me, well, strap on, cause this is where the fun begins. I played Backdraft Smith's The Brave and I started driving fast. I even yanked the handbrake a few times for short sliding and to prevent understeer and just drove like a street racer. We arrived at the mall. Karen screaming and scolding me, but I didn't give a crap and they got off. I rolled down the window and winked at the kid who enjoyed the way I drove and told the Karen, me, on the house. Tilda, I yanked on the handbrake again, locking the rear tire and floored it, making a bit of a burnout before I drove out of there, and that was my last Uber service. But I did got scolded for driving like that, but damn, it was worth it. The next one is titled, Want to Sit by the Window Seat? Okay. So my ex-boyfriend and I once went on vacation and he had never been in a plane before. Our seats were separate because of late planning and it was cheaper. I had a window seat somewhere and he had an aisle seat. So I offered him mine. He happily accepted and that's that. So on the plane back home he actually had a window seat and I had a middle seat. I asked him if we could trade now so I could sit by the window. He told me no, it was his spot and he wanted to sit there. I was kinda bummed, but okay. What do you know, 5 minutes later the stewardess comes to ask me if I could change seats with someone up front. Because of her crutches she wasn't allowed to sit near an emergency exit. So I got the seat in the front, with no one beside me, next to a window and a lot of extra leg space. My ex came whining to me that he wanted to switch seats now. So I happily told him to duck off. The relationship didn't last very long after that. The next one is titled, Have Another Return. I've been doing this for the last 6 months and suddenly realized that I should share with the sub. In August 2020, my region had a ton of rain for a good week. I ended up having some water issues at the house, so I ran to a home improvement store to buy a sump pump. When I got there, all the models were sold out except for one and there were only a couple left, so I snatched it up. Let's call this store L1. Not being all that familiar with sump pumps and wondering if I had a good one, I then ran over to another store to see their selection. I ended up buying another sump. Let's call this store HD. I now have 2 sump pumps and I'm ready to go. Long story short, I corrected the problem without needing the sumps. I take the second sump back to store HD and they take the return, no problem. I then go to store L1 and try to return the sump. The clerk tells me to hold on, then tells me I can't return that item. I show her my receipt. She says that they are not accepting returns of sump pumps. I ask about the return policy and where that exclusion is stated. Of course there was no exclusion. Then the 2 other clerks jump in and it gets chaotic and unprofessional. One of them blurts out that it's against OSHA rules. Those are workplace safety laws and nothing to do with returning merchandise. I ask for the manager and what do you know, the clerk that jumped in was the manager. so I walk away with a $170 sump pump that I don't need. I then drive 10 miles to their sister store, L2. And they take the return without any hesitation. I'm upset and call corporate to complain. They say they will follow up, blah blah blah. Store L1 is the closest home improvement store to my house, but I'm pissed at them for shitty customer service, so I now drove to store L2 for any purchases. I still shop at HD sometimes, but it's still further away than store L2, and they are virtually the same, so store L2 is my primary store now. Now for my petty revenge. Anytime I need to return from anything I buy at store L2, I return it to store L1. That's it, I buy from their sister store and return stuff to them. They probably don't care, but I know, I enjoy it. It's ducking up some tiny little corporate metric by a minuscule degree. It's ducking satisfying to give them the silent duck you every time I do a return. The next one is titled, Steal My Uber Account Info. I'll send a literal box of shit to your house. I had my Uber account compromised today. They set up 2FA on their phone number and reset my password, locking me out. I know, stupid of me. And while I've been waiting for the complete garbage Uber claims department to get back to me, the person set up an Uber Eats account with my info and ordered a $250 dinner, which of course sent a receipt to my email, which had their home address listed as the delivery location. Once I settled the Uber charge with my bank's fraud department, I went online and ordered a literal box of horse shit to be delivered to the person's house. I hope dinner was worth it. The next one is titled, Sympathy Can Go a Long Way. I called my boss to tell him I wouldn't be at work for the rest of the week as my mum was terminally ill in the hospital. The next day, about an hour after she passed away, he phoned and asked why I wasn't at work. I just hung up on him so I wouldn't say anything that would get me in trouble. I was still fuming about it the next day, so I sent the area manager a message explaining what my boss had done the previous day. For good measure, I attached a video of him breaking a freezer door while having a tantrum, which cost the store nearly £5,000 in lost stock and the repair costs when he'd told the assistant manager it broke on its own. He got fired that day and I got 2 weeks off with full pay. The last one is titled, You Never Know Who's Listening. Our desks were separated by a 5-foot cubicle wall. He was under the mistaken impression that it totally blocked out sound. Thus I got to hear all his loud phone conversations, primarily his booty calls including those with his boss fiancé. I figured it was none of my business and tried to ignore it. Well, there was a position in another department that I was interested in and, per procedure, I handed in an application to my talkative boss. I didn't hear anything further and followed up a couple of days later, only to be told that something must have happened to the application. I filled out another one and handed it in. As I returned to my desk, I heard the boss on the phone with a friend laughing about how he had just trashed my application again and how he was never going to let go of me. I go to boss and angrily offer my resignation, telling him what I had just overheard, explaining that I was constantly hearing his phone calls like his booty calls with the boss fiancé and such. He got very quiet and told me to go back to my desk and he'll take care of everything. The next day I come in and my boss is gone. The day after, I have an interview with the other department, got the position. I tend to avoid office drama, but really, he should have stuck to messing with his boss fiancé, and not try to mess with me as well. Thanks for listening.